Hi. Welcome to Lily's Story channel. If you like my channel, please like and subscribe. Now the story begins. Luther was my mate, my husband, my alpha. I loved him, trusted him even when the moon goddess denied me the gift of a child. I thought we were unshakable. Then, one night, I heard my stepsister giggle behind a locked door. Cheryl is so stupid. She doesn't even know we're making love all the time. Catherine. My surrogate. The woman who was supposed to carry my child. Luther's low chuckle followed, rich with satisfaction. I couldn't wait to have a baby. My world shattered in an instant. Love turned to ash on my tongue. Betrayal sank its claws into my chest, carving out everything I once believed in. I had spent years worshipping a bond that was nothing but a lie. Now, I am nothing. And yet, the moon goddess must have been watching because she did not leave me empty. Inside me, something stirs. Something ancient. Something vengeful. Luther wanted a child? I'll give him a nightmare. Something inside me shattered. I stepped away from the door, my breathing sharp and uneven. I wanted to throw it open, to scream, to demand an explanation. But what was there to explain? The truth was right in front of me, seeping through the cracks in the door. I was the fool. I had handed my mate over, placed him in Catherine's waiting arms, and now he belonged to her. I turned on my heel, walking away with my heart in pieces. For weeks, I said nothing. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just stopped. Stopped making his breakfast. Stopped massaging his back after a long day. Stopped worshipping the ground he walked on like some pathetic, lovesick mate. I withdrew into myself, letting silence be my only companion. And Luther noticed. One evening, as I sat at the dining table, pushing my food around my plate, he sighed loudly, slamming his hand against the polished wood. What the hell is wrong with you? I lifted my gaze, meeting him with eerie calmness. You shouldn't worry, I said, voice light, mocking. Catherine's there, isn't she? Doing everything for you. His eyes darkened. Watch your tone, Cheryl. I laughed softly. Why? Afraid of the truth? His lips curled back in a sneer. At least she can give me something you never could. The words sliced through me, sharp as any blade. I clenched my fists under the table. Right, I murmured. A child. His silence told me everything I needed to know. Then, as if fate enjoyed twisting the knife in my back, Catherine waltzed in, a smug smile on her lips. I have news, she said, her eyes flicking between the two of us. She reached into her bag, pulling out a small black and white photo. My breath hitched the moment I recognized it. An ultrasound. I'm pregnant, she announced, voice thick with triumph. The air in the room turned suffocating. I felt the walls closing in, pressing against my chest, stealing every bit of oxygen. My heartbeat pounded in my ears, drowning out every other sound. But what truly killed me wasn't the news itself. It was Luther's face. Pure, unfiltered joy. The kind of joy he had never once shown me. He turned to Catherine, his hands immediately wrapping around her waist. He pressed his forehead to hers, whispering words I couldn't hear. They didn't even notice me sitting there, a ghost in my own life. I forced a smile, though my vision blurred. Congratulations, I said, my voice hollow. The Skylar pack finally has its heir. Catherine turned to me, placing a hand on her stomach. It's your baby too, Cheryl. I'm just the surrogate. I let out a bitter laugh. It doesn't look like one. I left before I could break any further. The rooftop was quiet, save for the distant howling of wolves. I stood at the edge, the wind biting at my skin. My mind raced, replaying every moment, every lie, every touch they shared behind my back. I was so stupid. How could I have trusted them? A soft voice broke through the silence. Cheryl, I'm sorry. I turned to see Catherine standing there, her face a mask of fake guilt. Sorry? My voice trembled with rage. You're a homewrecker. You stole my mate. She laughed, the sound light and mocking. Luther doesn't love you anymore, she said, stepping closer. I have his baby. You have nothing. The world turned red. Before I could stop myself, I lunged at her. But before I could touch her, she gasped, stumbling back. And then she screamed. She clutched her stomach. Eaves wide. With pain, before she collapsed onto the cold floor. Heavy footsteps thundered up the stairs. Luther's eyes landed on Catherine, his face twisting in fury. What the hell did you do, Cheryl? And just like that, I became the villain in my own story. The slap came hard and fast, the sharp sting exploding across my cheek. My head snapped to the side, my vision blurring for a moment. The metallic taste of blood spread over my tongue as I let out a slow, controlled breath. Alpha Luther stood before me, chest heaving with rage. His dark eyes burned with fury, his jaw clenched so tight I thought it might snap. Apologize, he growled, his voice laced with authority. I wiped the blood from my lip, refusing to bow. I will never be sorry for something I didn't do. Catherine let out a dramatic sob, clutching her stomach like she had been the one struck. She hates me, Luther, she cried, her voice shaking. She said I should abort the baby. She doesn't want me to have your child. My stomach twisted at her lies, but I refused to let my pain show. Luther's face darkened. You're jealous, Cheryl. You've always been jealous of her. I let out a humorless laugh. Jealous? You betrayed me. Enough, he roared, making the walls tremble. I lifted my chin, daring him to do worse. His gaze was wild with unchecked rage, and for a moment, I thought he might strike me again. Instead, he turned to his beta, Mason, who stood silently by the door, watching the scene unfold. Lock her in the basement, Luther ordered. She can rot there until she learns to respect her sister. My heart stilled. You wouldn't. Luther leaned in, his voice a whisper of ice. Try me. Mason hesitated for only a second before grabbing my arm, his grip firm. I didn't fight as he dragged me away. It was no use. The moment Luther made up his mind, there was no changing it. The Schuyler Pack basement was nothing more than a forgotten pit of darkness, damp and reeking of mildew. The heavy metal door creaked as Mason shoved me inside, the sound echoing through the stone walls before it slammed shut behind me. The darkness swallowed me whole. I slammed my fists against the door. Luther. Get me out of here. Nothing. Just silence. I slid down against the wall, wrapping my arms around my legs as the chill seeped into my bones. Hours passed, maybe more. The hunger gnawed at my stomach, my limbs trembling from the cold. I closed my eyes, exhaustion pulling at me, my mind drifting somewhere between sleep and despair. This was how I would die. The lock clicked. My head snapped up as the heavy door creaked open, golden light spilling into the basement. I blinked against the sudden brightness, my breath catching as a shadowed figure stepped inside. For a brief, foolish moment, I thought it was Luther. But then he spoke. Cheryl, the deep voice was unfamiliar, yet strangely warm. Vander Schuyler. Luther's stepbrother. He knelt beside me, his face barely visible in the dim light. You're freezing. My body trembled, too weak to move. Vander didn't wait for an answer, he slipped his arms around me, lifting me with ease. I wanted to protest, to demand why he was helping me, but the warmth of his body against mine lulled me into a hazy silence. Stay awake, he murmured as he carried me outside. You're not dying today. The fresh air hit me like a slap, burning my skin. My head lolled against his shoulder as my vision blurred again. Why? I managed to whisper. Why are you helping me? Vander's jaw tightened. Because you don't deserve this. Everything else faded as unconsciousness claimed me. I woke to the sterile scent of antiseptic and soft sheets beneath my body. My fingers curled into the fabric as I turned my head, squinting against the harsh white lights. "You're awake." The voice was gentle, unfamiliar. I turned to see a healer standing beside me, her hands clasped in front of her. Vander stood behind her, his expression unreadable. "Whisper. Where am I?" "Schuyler Pack Hospital," the healer answered. "You were severely hypothermic when Vander brought you in. Had he waited any longer, you wouldn't have survived." A shiver ran down my spine. I had been that close to death? "You need to rest," the healer continued, then hesitated before adding, "There's something else." Something about her tone sent ice through my veins. "What?" My voice was barely above a whisper. She exchanged a look with Vander before speaking. "You're pregnant." The words didn't register. They couldn't. I stared at her, waiting for the punchline, for her to say she was joking. But she didn't. "That's not possible," I breathed. I can't have children." "The tests don't lie," she said gently. "You're about 3 weeks along." I pressed a shaking hand against my stomach. I had spent years believing I was infertile. Years watching Luther look at me with disappointment, watching him seek solace in Catherine. And now. A child. Luther's child. I swallowed the bile rising in my throat. No. I couldn't let him find out. He had already discarded me like trash. If he knew about the baby, he would use it against me. I turned to Vander, my voice hoarse. "Luther can't know." Vander didn't look surprised, he studied me for a long moment before nodding. "What do you want to do?" My chest tightened. "I want a divorce." His brows lifted slightly, but he didn't argue. "And the baby?" I clenched my fists. "I won't let him take my child." Silence stretched between us before I forced myself to meet his gaze. Would you be willing to claim the baby as yours?" For the first time, I saw something flicker in Vander's eyes. He didn't answer right away, just stared at me, as if weighing the weight of my words. Then, finally, he exhaled. "If that's what you want, then yes." When I returned to the Schuyler mansion with Alpha Vander, I saw Luther standing at the foot of the grand staircase, his face dark with jealousy, his piercing gaze locked onto Vander's hand clasping mine. His voice was sharp as a blade. "Why is she out of the basement?" Vander stepped forward, his grip tightening protectively around my fingers. "Why the hell did you lock up your own mate? Left her to die in hunger and cold?" His voice was low, dangerous. Luther scoffed. "She hurt Catherine, her own sister. And now she wants to harm the baby that will strengthen our bond." I yanked my hand from Vander's, stepping past him. "Enough." My voice echoed through the grand hall. "I want a divorce, Luther." His eyes flashed. "No." The word was final, dismissive. As if my choice didn't matter. As if I was nothing. Days passed. I was trapped within these walls, unable to leave, unable to see Vander. Luther had barred him from entering the mansion, and the guards made sure I couldn't sneak out either. I was a prisoner in my own home, suffocating in a golden cage. I spent most of my time staring out the window, my mind racing for a way out. I couldn't simply leave, it would damage my pack. A divorce wasn't just between two people, it was political, a shift in alliances. Timing was everything. Then, one evening, Luther came to my room. I didn't look at him, but I felt his presence looming behind me. "Catherine's birthday is coming up," he said. "You'll help prepare for it. It's your only chance to apologize." I turned slowly, my hands clenching into fists. "Apologize? For what?" His gaze was cold. "For your jealousy. For making things difficult. This is your chance to prove you still have a place here." I let out a bitter laugh. "A place? Do I look like a fool to you?" He didn't answer. He didn't need to. The answer was clear. Catherine would always come first. The night of Catherine's birthday party arrived, and the mansion was unrecognizable. Elegant decorations adorned the walls, expensive wines flowed endlessly, and the grand ballroom sparkled with golden chandeliers. It was a celebration fit for Luna. But Catherine wasn't the Luna. I was. I stood near the back of the room unnoticed, watching as Luther paraded her around like she was his queen. The way he looked at her, the way he held her waist, it was something I had never received from him. My own birthday had passed months ago. No celebration. No party. Just me, sitting alone while Luther claimed he had urgent packing matters to attend to. But now, seeing this how he moved heaven and earth for Catherine, I realized how blind I had been. The expensive gifts he had brought for her weren't simple tokens of appreciation. The lingering touches, the stolen glances, the way he defended her at every turn, it wasn't just favoritism. It was love. And I had been nothing but a placeholder. The party carried on, the loud music and laughter filled the air. I was nothing more than a shadow against the walls, listening to the whispers that floated around me. Isn't she the alpha's mate? Why is she standing alone? It's obvious, isn't it? The alpha treats her like a stranger. I heard Catherine is carrying his real heir. Maybe Cherry's being pushed aside. Their words dug into me like claws tearing at wounds that had barely begun to scab over. My hands trembled as I turned away, my vision blurring. I couldn't breathe. I needed to get out. I spun on my heel, ready to escape, when a sudden screech rang through the ballroom. The microphone. The music died. Conversations halted. All eyes turned to the stage. And there, standing under the bright lights, was Vander. My breath hitched. His expression was calm, but his eyes burned with something fierce, something determined. He held the microphone in his hand, gaze sweeping across the crowd before landing on Luther. I won't stay silent any longer, Vander's voice carried through the room. You all deserve to know the truth. A murmur rippled through the guests, confusion and curiosity buzzing in the air. Alpha Luther has been lying to all of you. Vander continued. Catherine was never Cheryl's surrogate. She was never meant to carry the alpha's heir. Because she isn't just a surrogate. He turned to Luther. Voice laced with venom. She's his mistress. Gasps filled the room. I felt my heartbeat slam against my ribs as every eye turned to Luther, to Catherine. Catherine's face drained of color, her hands shaking as she stepped forward. Vander, stop this. You're ruining the party. Oh, I'm not done yet, Vander cut her off. I wonder, Luther, how long were you planning to keep up this act? How long were you going to pretend that Cheryl was your Luna when you've already replaced her? Luther's fists clenched, his face twisting with fury. You don't know what you're talking about. Don't I? Vander let out a cold chuckle. Then why don't we ask Cheryl? Silence. Everyone turned to look at me, and Vander gave me a look that silently urged this was my moment to speak up. I'm pregnant. I finally said. The room was suffocating. The moment my words left my lips, the entire ballroom turned into a war zone of whispers and gasps. The tension was so thick I could taste it, bitter and electric. Luther's expression barely changed at first. He stared at me, his eyes dark and unreadable, like he was waiting for the punchline to a sick joke. Then I gave it to him. It's Vander's. Silence. A deafening, crushing silence. And then chaos. Catherine sucked in a sharp breath beside Luther, her nails digging into his arm. The murmurs turned into an uproar, voices overlapping, clashing, breaking through the heavy tension like shattered glass. Luther's entire body went rigid. His breathing turned ragged, his hands trembling at his sides not with fear, but with fury. What did you just say? His voice was barely above a whisper, but it carried through the hall like a blade pressed against my throat. I swallowed hard, my heart hammering so violently it hurt. But I couldn't back down. This was my only way out. I'm carrying Vander's child, I repeated, my voice steadier this time. And that means I have no place here anymore. Our bond is over, Luther. The words were a death sentence. Luther lunged. I barely had time to react before he was on me, his grip vice-like as he yanked me close, his fingers digging into my wrist so hard I thought the bone might snap. Liar. His breath was hot against my skin, his fury vibrating through me. You think I'll believe that? You were locked in my basement, rotting in filth. When the hell did you have time to spread your legs for my brother? I flinched, but I refused to let him see my fear. I had time, I bit out. Enough time to find someone who actually wanted me. Luther's grip tightened. For a second, I thought he might throw me to the ground right there, humiliate me in front of everyone. Then Vander stepped in. His hand landed on Luther's shoulder, his voice calm but firm. Let her go. Luther snapped his head toward Vander, his lips curling in disgust. You, he laughed, sharp and humorless. You expect me to believe you'd touch her? That you'd claim my mate? Vander didn't even blink. Believe what you want. His gaze flickered at me, something unreadable behind his eyes. But I don't abandon what's mine. The entire room held its breath. Luther looked between us, his face contorting with something ugly, something dangerous. You think you can just take her from me? His voice dropped to a whisper, but it was more terrifying than his shouting. You think I'll let this go? I forced my chin up. You don't have a choice. The veins in his neck bulged. His control was slipping. And I knew he was seconds away from doing something violent. Catherine tugged on his arm, her voice desperate. Luther, don't. But he wrenched away from her and turned back to me, his eyes burning with something worse than hatred. You think you can cut me out of your life that easily? His voice was poison, sinking into my skin. You think I'll let you walk away after everything? My chest tightened, but I refused to look away. You already walked away first. He exhaled sharply, nostrils flaring. If that's how you want to play this, fine. His gaze dropped to my stomach, his lips curling. But tell me, Cheryl, what do you think will happen when that child is born? A chill raced down my spine. Luther took a step closer, towering over me. Do you really think you can keep a Skylar from me? Whether that child is yours, mine, or his glare cut to Vander, his voice laced with venom. That baby is still part of this pack. And you know what that means. My stomach churned. I knew exactly what he meant. Skylar pack heirs weren't just personal possessions. They were weapons. Pawns. And Luther didn't let go of what was his. Fear coiled in my gut, but I shoved it down. I won't let you take my child. Luther smirked, slow and cruel. Then you better run, Cheryl. The room felt too small, the air too thin. I felt trapped, cornered because Luther wasn't letting me go. Not easily. Not ever. My hands curled into fists. You don't own me. His smirk widened. Don't I? Before I could respond, before I could even process what was happening, he turned to the guests, his expression twisting into one of cold authority. The Skylar pack does not accept traitors, he announced, his voice echoing through the hall. And a Luna who betrays her mate? A woman who carries another alpha's child? He exhaled sharply, shaking his head. She is no Luna of mine. Words should have freed me. Instead, they shackled me further. Because when he turned back to me, his next words came like a blade to my throat. You're banished from this pack. A gasp rippled through the room. Catherine's eyes widened, her lips parting, as if she hadn't expected things to escalate this far. Vander tensed beside me. Luther, don't do this. Get her out of my sight, Luther cut him off, his voice like ice. before I ripped that bastard from her myself. My blood ran cold. Luther held my gaze for a long, agonizing moment. And then he turned on his heel, striding away, leaving me standing there, shaking, broken but alive. I barely registered the guards moving toward me. I barely heard Vander's voice, arguing, pushing back, trying to stop this. Because the only thing ringing in my ears was Luther's final warning. You better run, Cheryl. The Schuyler pack stood before me, a sea of judgmental faces, their gazes sharp with disgust. My body was stiff, my nails digging into my palms as the elders delivered their verdict. You are hereby exiled from the Schuyler pack, Cheryl. The elder's voice rang through the hall like a final nail in a coffin. I swallowed hard, refusing to let them see the fear clawing at my chest. I wouldn't beg. I wouldn't plead for a place among people who had already discarded me. I lifted my chin, staring at them defiantly. Fine, I said, my voice stronger than I felt. You can have your pack. I never belonged here anyway. A murmur rippled through the crowd, but before I could turn to leave, a deep, firm voice cut through the tension. No. Vander stood tall beside me. His presence was a force of its own, commanding attention, demanding respect. His silver eyes burned with something fierce, something protective. This is wrong, Vander said, his voice steady. You're casting her out based on nothing but rumors and lies. If this is how the Schuyler pack treats its Luna, then maybe it's not worth being part of at all. Luther's face darkened. This is not your concern, Vander. Vander let out a cold chuckle. Not my concern? She carries my child. His words echoed through the room like a storm breaking. Gasps filled the space. Whispers spread like wildfire. Luther's hands curled into fists. You expect me to believe that? I felt the weight of every stare, the pressure closing in on me, but I met Luther's gaze without flinching. Believe what you want, I said. But you lost the right to question me the moment you left me to rot. Luther took a step forward, fury burning in his eyes, but before he could speak, the elder cleared his throat, regaining control of the room. Regardless of who the father is, the elder said, his voice neutral, there is a law that cannot be ignored. A silence settled over the room. My stomach twisted. The child of an alpha belongs to the pack. Whether you are exiled or not, Cheryl, once you give birth, the heir must be brought back. My heart stilled. No. This couldn't be happening. I had lied to protect my child, to sever my ties with the Schuyler pack. But now I was bound to them in a way I couldn't escape. Luther's lips curled into a smirk. Looks like you can't run, Cheryl. I wanted to scream. I wanted to fight, to deny it, but I had already claimed Vander as the father. There was no way out of this. Vander's hand found mine, his touch grounding me. We're leaving, he said, his voice final. And no one will come near her without going through me. The elders said nothing, but their silence was an answer in itself. For now, I was free. But not for long. Weeks have passed. I had left the Schuyler pack behind, settling in a quiet town miles away. I told myself it was a fresh start. A new beginning. But the past followed me like a shadow. Everywhere I went, there were whispers. The small town wasn't as disconnected from pack politics as I had hoped. My name was on everyone's lips. She was thrown out of her own pack. She cheated on her mate with his stepbrother. She's nothing but a disgrace. Catherine made sure my name was dirt. I could hear her voice in the rumors, the way she twisted the truth to paint herself as the victim and me as the villain. She's a whore, someone muttered as I passed. I clenched my fists but kept walking. They didn't know the truth. They didn't know what I had endured. But it didn't matter. The world had already decided who I was. I kept my head down, focusing on work, trying to survive. I worked at a small cafe, blending into the background, avoiding unnecessary attention. But even here, the whispers followed. I caught people staring. Judging. I pretended not to care, but every glance was a dagger, every hushed conversation another wound. The worst part? I was alone. Vander had promised to stand by me and he did, but his responsibilities kept pulling him away. He had his own pack, his own problems. He couldn't always be here, protecting me. I had to be strong. But strength didn't stop the nightmares. The fear. One evening, as I walked home from the cafe, a chill crept down my spine. The feeling of being watched. I glanced over my shoulder. 2 men. Strangers. They didn't move, but I felt their eyes on me. My pulse quickened. I gripped my coat tighter, my fingers trembling. They didn't follow, but I knew better than to ignore my instincts. I reached my apartment, locked the door behind me, and exhaled. It's fine. I'm imagining things. I turned and froze. A letter sat on the floor, just inside my door. My blood ran cold. I hadn't heard anyone slide it under. With shaking hands, I picked it up, unfolding the paper. Only one sentence was written. Return before the birth, or we will take the child ourselves. I dropped the letter, my breath coming fast. They were watching me. They were waiting. And no matter where I ran, they would find me. My stomach twisted in fear, my hand instinctively pressing against my belly. They weren't going to let me go. I wasn't free. I was trapped. And this time there was no way out. I sat frozen on the couch, my heartbeat pounding in my ears. Every shadow outside my window felt like a threat. Every creak in the apartment made my skin crawl. I wasn't safe. I never had been. Vander needed to know. My hands trembled as I reached for my phone. I hesitated, my thumb hovering over his name. Involving him meant dragging him into a war he didn't start. But could I fight this alone? Could I protect my baby from the Skylar Pack's greed? A sharp knock at the door made me jump. I turned slowly, dread coiling in my stomach. Another knock. More insistent this time. I forced myself to my feet, creeping toward the door. Maybe it was just my landlord. Maybe I was paranoid. But deep down, I already knew. I pressed my ear against the wood, holding my breath. Nothing. No voices. No movement. But the air was thick with danger, an invisible force pressing against my chest. A third knock. No. Not a knock. A single, deliberate scrape against the door. Slow. Taunting. My stomach twisted. I backed up, my pulse roaring in my ears. A soft laugh. Cheryl. It was Catherine. I swallowed hard, gripping the strap of my bag. Open up, she purred. We need to talk. I said nothing. Silence stretched between us like a blade, sharp and dangerous. Then, her voice dipped lower. You think hiding will save you? A pause. That baby inside you, it doesn't belong to you. Cold dread slithered down my spine. You're in my way, Cheryl. Her tone was smooth, almost lazy, but beneath it was venom. And you know how I deal with problems, don't you? I knew. I had always known what she was capable of. I took another step back, my heart hammering. The handle twisted. I bolted toward the kitchen, my fingers gripping the nearest drawer, yanking it open. A knife. I snatched it just as the door burst open. Catherine strode in, her heels clicking against the floor. She looked so casual, like she had just come for a friendly visit. But the glint in her eyes told another story. She smiled. You really thought you could run? I tightened my grip on the knife. Get out. She tilted her head, mock amusement flickering across her face. You can't protect it, she whispered. You think Luther will let you keep an heir? You think Vander will? I clenched my jaw. Vander. Doesn't matter. Her eyes darkened. Because you won't make it that far. She lunged. I stumbled back, barely dodging as she reached for me. My elbow slammed against the counter, pain jolting up my arm. I swung the knife blindly, but she caught my wrist, twisting it until the blade clattered to the floor. My breath came fast. You. She shoved me. Hard. I crashed against the table, knocking over a chair. Pain shot through my side, but I didn't stop. I scrambled to my feet, my body screaming at me to fight. Catherine smirked. Still stubborn. I rushed at her. We collided, a tangle of limbs and fury. She clawed at my hair, and I swung my fist blindly, catching her jaw. She cursed, shoving me back, but I didn't let go. My fingers found her wrist, twisting it as hard as I could. She shrieked, her nails raking across my cheek. White-hot pain flared, but I didn't stop. I wouldn't lose. Not this time. I kicked out, sending her stumbling. She hit the counter, eyes blazing with rage. You little. I grabbed the knife from the floor, pointing it at her with shaking hands. Her chest rose and fell, her lips curling in a snarl. You're dead, Cheryl. A sound outside. Heavy footsteps. Catherine's gaze flickered toward the door. I saw the shift in her expression, the flicker of panic she tried to hide. Then a loud bang. The door slammed open. Two figures stood in the doorway. Alpha Vander and Luther. Both of them radiating fury. Catherine's face twisted in shock, her entire body going rigid. I stood there, breathless, blood on my cheek, gripping the knife like my life depended on it. The room was dead silent. But tension pulsed through the air like a living thing. Luther's gaze swept over the wreckage, the overturned chair, the blood smeared on my skin, the wild look in Catherine's eyes. Vander's eyes locked onto me. His hands curled into fists, his whole body taut. And then he moved. Catherine tried to step back, but Vander was faster. He was in front of her in seconds, his grip closing around her arm. What the hell do you think you're doing? His voice was low, dangerous. Catherine let out a nervous laugh, but I saw the fear flash across her face. This is a misunderstanding. Shut up. Vander's voice sent a chill down my spine. I don't want to hear a single excuse. Luther, however, was quiet. His eyes burned into me, sharp and unreadable. Then he spoke. Cheryl. His voice was softer than I expected. Almost amused. You look like you've been through hell. I tightened my grip on the knife, my entire body trembling. Stay away from me. His lips curled into something resembling a smirk. Why would I do that? You're carrying something that belongs to me. A shiver ran through me. Vander growled. She's not yours. Vander moved in front of me, shielding me with his body. Don't you dare touch her. Luther exhaled slowly, tilting his head. We'll see. I pressed a hand against my stomach. My baby kicked, a small, desperate reminder of why I couldn't be caught in the middle of this. My breath came in ragged gasps as I glared at Katharina and Luther, fury burning through every inch of my body. She stood across from me, her chest rising and falling, eyes gleaming with satisfaction. You should have never come back, she hissed. You think you can just waltz in and steal everything from me? I let out a bitter laugh, my voice hoarse. Steal? You're the one who's trying to erase me. I took a step closer, my hands trembling with anger. You're afraid, aren't you, Catherine? Afraid that my child, your own blood, will take what you think belongs to you. Her expression twisted, but she didn't deny it. You were never supposed to have a child, she spat. Not before me, not before my son. Do you know what you've done? You've ruined everything. A sharp pain shot through my abdomen, but I forced myself to stand tall. You wanted to get rid of me, I said, my voice low. Because you don't want any competition for your son. The room fell into thick silence. Catherine's eyes flickered, but she quickly masked it with a sneer. "Don't be ridiculous," she scoffed. "Why would I be threatened by a bastard?" I clenched my fists. "Because you know the truth," I snapped. "My child is an heir, just like yours. And that terrifies you." I barely had time to react before Luther's furious gaze landed on me. Then his eyes shifted to Catherine, and something in his expression darkened. "What the hell is going on?" Luther's voice was a low growl, his aura pressing down on the room like a storm ready to break. Catherine straightened, smoothing down her hair as if she hadn't just been clawing at me moments ago. "She attacked me," she said, feigning innocence. "I was only trying to talk to her, and she lost control." I let out a sharp, humorless laugh. "That's a damn lie." Vander's gaze snapped to me, his eyes scanning my face, the red mark on my cheek, the way I clutched my stomach protectively. His jaw tightened. "Catherine, I suggest you choose your next words carefully," Vander said, his voice dangerously low. "Because I don't believe for a second that Cheryl is the one who started this." Catherine's expression faltered, but she quickly masked it. "Oh, please," she scoffed. "She's been looking for an excuse to stir up trouble. She's desperate to stay relevant." I turned to Luther, ignoring the way his cold eyes bore into me. "You want the truth?" I said, my voice shaking with rage. "Catherine has been trying to get rid of me since the moment she found out I was pregnant. She doesn't care about me. She doesn't even care about you." Luther's face remained unreadable, but there was something in his gaze, something uncertain. Catherine scoffed. "And why would I do that?" she challenged. "You're nothing to me, Cheryl. You never were. You mean nothing except for the fact that my child threatens your son's future," I snapped. "That's why you're desperate to make me disappear. Because you know that if my child is born, your son won't be the only heir." Luther's gaze flickered with something unreadable, but I wasn't done. I turned back to Catherine, my voice sharp as a blade. "You tried to get rid of me because you're afraid," I said. "But I won't disappear. My child won't disappear. And no matter how hard you try, you will never erase me." Catherine's face twisted with fury. "You're delusional," she hissed. "No one will ever believe you." A thick silence followed. Then Luther exhaled slowly, his expression darkening as he turned to Catherine. "Enough." Catherine flinched, eyes widening slightly. "Luther." "I said enough," he repeated, his voice colder this time. Catherine swallowed hard, but she refused to back down. "You're really going to stand there and let her say these things?" Luther didn't respond right away. His sharp gaze flickered between us, but something in his posture shifted, like he was seeing Catherine in a new light. Finally, he grabbed her wrist. "We're leaving." Catherine yanked at his hold. "I am not done." "I don't care," Luther cut her off. "You've done enough." Her face twisted with fury, but she had no choice. He dragged her out of the room, her protests fading as the door slammed shut behind them. Silence settled between me and Vander. I exhaled shakily, my body finally registering the exhaustion. My cheek still burned, my heart still pounded. But it was over. For now. Vander moved closer. "Are you okay?" I nodded. But I knew he didn't believe me. "We can't stay here," he said. "Not after this." I clenched my jaw. I know. Luther would come back. Maybe not today. Maybe not tomorrow. But he wouldn't let this go. And Catherine? She would never stop trying to get rid of me. "Where do we go?" I asked, my voice quieter now. Vander's expression softened slightly. But his determination never wavered. "Somewhere safe," he said. "Somewhere they can't touch you." I looked down, pressing a hand against my stomach. My child kicked, a small reminder that I wasn't just fighting for myself anymore. I had to be stronger. I had to survive. For both of us. Vander reached for my hand, his warmth grounding me. We'll figure it out together. I didn't feel safe. Even after Luther dragged Catherine away, even after the heavy door slammed shut behind them, I knew this wasn't over. The bruises on my skin would fade, but the battle wasn't finished. Not even close. Vander stood beside me, watching the empty hallway with sharp, untrusting eyes. I could feel the weight of his presence, solid and unyielding, but it didn't ease the storm inside me. My fingers curled into fists as I fought against the overwhelming need to scream, to let out the frustration clawing at my ribs. I stood on my ground. I had finally told the truth. And yet, I still wasn't free. Come on, Vander said, his voice was low. We need to leave before Luther changes his mind. I let out a shaky breath and followed him out of the building, the night air sharp against my burning skin. Each step felt heavier, the weight of my choices pressing down on me. I had nowhere left to go. I had no pack, no home. Only the child growing inside me and a war I didn't know how to win. Where are we going? I asked, my voice hoarse. Somewhere safe, Vander said without hesitation. Somewhere he can't reach you. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to trust that I wouldn't have to keep running. But Luther had proven one thing tonight: he would never stop hunting me. I kept walking anyway. Vander took me to a cabin deep in the woods, hidden away from prying eyes. It was quiet, the kind of quiet that should have been comforting. It wasn't. I stood in the center of the small living room, my arms crossed over my chest as Vander locked the door behind us. My body ached, exhaustion creeping into my bones, but my mind wouldn't stop racing. You'll be safe here, Vander said, watching me carefully. Safe. The word felt meaningless now. I don't even know what that means anymore, I muttered. Vander's expression darkened. He stepped closer, his presence filling the space between us. You don't have to fight this alone, Cheryl. I looked at him then, really looked at him. There was something in his eyes, something I didn't know how to name. And it scared me. I turned away. I don't have a choice. Vander exhaled sharply, frustrated. You do. You just don't trust anyone enough to take it. Maybe he was right. Maybe it didn't matter. Because the moment I let my guard down, the world reminded me why I couldn't. The knock at the door came just as I started to believe, for a fleeting second, that I could breathe. Vander's entire body went tense. I froze. No one should have been able to find us. He moved first, hand resting on the door handle. Stay behind me. I didn't argue. The door swung open, and my heart stopped. It wasn't Luther. It wasn't Catherine, it was someone I hadn't seen in years. Cheryl, the man rasped, eyes wild. His clothes were torn, blood staining his sleeves. He looked like he had run through hell to get here. I took a step forward. What? They took everything, he interrupted, shaking his head. The pack. The land. It's all gone. The world tilted. What? My voice barely escaped my lips. Vander's posture shifted, his body going rigid. Who? The man's gaze met mine, haunted and broken. Luther, he said. He took it all. I sucked in a sharp breath, but it felt like I couldn't get enough air. Luther had done this. Not just to me but to my entire pack. They had thrown me out. They had abandoned me. And now, they were the ones suffering. Because of me. He forced them out, the man continued, voice unsteady. Said if you came back, they could have their land. But if you didn't, he hesitated, swallowing hard. They have nowhere to go, Cheryl. They're scattered. Lost. Some are already dead. A sharp pain stabbed through my chest. I stumbled back, my fingers gripping the edge of the table to keep myself upright. The room felt too small, the walls closing in. This wasn't happening. You know what this is, Vander said beside me, his voice unreadable. I did. It was a trap. A cruel, merciless game Luther had designed just for me. I had fought so hard to escape him. And now, because of me, the people who had turned their backs on me had lost everything. Vander grabbed my arm, his grip firm but not unkind. Cheryl, don't do this. You don't owe them anything. My breath shuddered. But I did. I owed them the life I had once called my own. I owed them their home. And Luther knew it. My phone vibrated in my pocket, the sound deafening in the silence. I pulled it out with shaking hands. An unknown number. I didn't have to open it. I already knew what it would say. Still, I did. A picture filled the screen. My old pack, homeless, broken, huddled together on unfamiliar land. Their faces were hollow, defeated. Then the message came. You know what you have to do. The phone slipped from my fingers, hitting the floor with a hollow thud. Vander cursed under his breath. Damn it, Cheryl, don't let him pull you back in. But I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. The Skylar Pack's stronghold loomed before me, a place I once called home but now felt nothing but dread toward. My hands curled into fists at my sides as forced myself forward, each step a battle against the suffocating memories of betrayal and pain. Vander walked beside me, silent but steady. I knew he didn't agree with this. Luther had taken everything from my people. Their homes. Their land. Their safety. I wouldn't let him win. I swallowed hard and lifted my chin, forcing my feet forward. I had survived worse. I wouldn't break now. The elder's chamber was as intimidating as I remembered: tall pillars, cold stone floors, and faces carved from judgment. The moment I stepped in, I fell to my knees before them, my pride be damned. Please, my voice cracked, but I didn't care. You have to undo what Alpha Luther has done. He's taken everything from my people. They have nowhere to go. Their homes are gone, their land stripped from them. Elder Rowan, the one I once believed had wisdom, scoffed. Alpha Luther has done what was necessary. My breath caught. Necessary? Destroying innocent lives is necessary? Another elder, a woman with sharp eyes, folded her hands in front of her. It is not our place to interfere. You, Cheryl, have brought this upon yourself. I felt like I had been slapped. How is this my fault? Elder Marcus's gaze was merciless. You betrayed Alpha Luther. My heart pounded against my ribs. I never. You cheated, he continued, voice heavy with condemnation. If you had remained loyal, none of this would have happened. A bitter laugh clawed its way up my throat. I cheated? My fingers trembled as I pointed at them. You're all so quick to condemn me, but did you ever stop to ask who Luther was in bed with while I was carrying his child? A flicker of unease passed through the room. Lies, the elder woman snapped. Alpha Luther and Catherine have already bonded as mates. Their connection is sacred. My stomach twisted. Of course, Luther had already rewritten the story to paint himself as the victim. He had always been good at erasing his sins while making me the villain. I should have expected it. A heavy silence hung between us before the doors swung open. I felt it before I saw him. A chill ran down my spine as Alpha Luther stepped inside, his presence suffocating. Catherine clung to his arm, her lips curling into a victorious smile, as if she had already won. My breath locked in my throat as I met Luther's gaze. Cold. Controlled. Empty. But beneath that, something else lurked. Longing. Possession. My fingers curled against my palms, nails digging into my skin. I shouldn't have cared. I shouldn't have felt the burn of his betrayal all over again. But I did. Without thinking, I slapped him. The sound echoed through the chamber. Catherine gasped, stepping back in shock, but Luther didn't move. He stood there, expression unreadable, jaw tightening only slightly. "You're a monster," I spat, my chest heaving. "You took everything from me. From them. All because you couldn't stand the thought of me being free." His gaze flickered, something dark flashing in his eyes before vanishing. "I did what I had to do." I laughed, but it was hollow. "You destroyed lives, Luther." I took back what was mine. His voice was quiet, dangerous. I shook my head, disgust curling in my gut. "I was never yours." A heavy silence settled between us, thick with things left unsaid. Then, Luther's lips curled into a slow, calculated smirk. "I have an offer," he said, voice smooth and taunting. My stomach dropped. "I'll return everything," he continued. "Your people will have their homes, their land. Everything will go back to the way it was." My throat tightened. "And what do you want in return?" His gaze burned into me. "Admit it." The room fell into a deathly silence. "Admit that the child in your belly is mine." The air drained from my lungs. He was testing me. Waiting for me to break. I swallowed hard, every muscle in my body screaming to crumble under the weight of it all. But I wouldn't. I met his gaze, forcing every ounce of strength I had into my voice. "The child belongs to Alpha Vander." Vander took a step closer to me. His presence solid, unwavering. Luther said nothing, but the air around him changed, tightened. His fingers curled at his sides, his control slipping for the briefest second before his expression went blank. His silence was more terrifying than his rage. Then, suddenly, he exhaled a low chuckle. It was dark, almost amused, but there was an edge to it, something sharp beneath the surface. His lips tilted slightly, but it wasn't a smile. "You're willing to risk everything just to defy me?" His voice was quieter now, but it sent a chill down my spine. I held my ground. "You don't own me, Luther." He leaned in slightly, just enough for only me to hear. "That's where you're wrong." Something in my chest tightened painfully. Luther turned to the elders. "If she refuses to acknowledge the truth, then let her suffer the consequences." And just like that, I knew he wasn't going to stop. He had more power, more influence. He had already rewritten history to suit himself, and now, I was trapped in the nightmare of his making. I should have expected it. The moment I stepped out of the elder's chamber, my chest still tight from Luther's cruel bargain, I knew things would only get worse. But nothing could have prepared me for the chaos outside. Whispers turned into murmurs. Murmurs into shouts. And then, as I stepped into the courtyard, the full force of it hit me. My people. They were here. A mass of them, gathered outside the Schuyler mansion, their faces twisted in desperation. My stomach dropped as I realized they weren't alone. Other packs, smaller, struggling packs, had joined them, their voices mixing into a storm of protest. They were begging. Pleading. "Give us back our homes. Let us go. This isn't our fight." I gripped the doorframe to steady myself as my heart pounded. This wasn't just about me anymore. Luther had dragged innocent people into this war, punishing not only my old pack but Nyon he saw as beneath him. Guilt pressed against my ribs like a crushing weight. I did this. Because of me, families had been uprooted. Children had nowhere to sleep. Warriors who once swore loyalty to me were now treated like criminals. I turned sharply, locking eyes with Luther, who stood beside me, watching the scene unfold with a sickening calmness. He didn't look surprised. He didn't look moved. If anything, he looked amused. "Let them go," I whispered, voice trembling. He barely glanced at me. "I warned you, Cheryl. Actions have consequences." I sucked in a breath, trying to steady the anger boiling in my veins. "This isn't about me anymore. You're punishing people who have nothing to do with this." Luther finally turned to face me, his expression unreadable. "Then give me what I want." My stomach twisted. I already knew what he wanted. Vander's voice cut through the tension. You don't have to do this. Cheryl. I turned to see him stepping closer, his gaze burning with frustration. His presence was grounding, strong, but I shook my head. I had no choice. Tears burned at the back of my eyes as I turned back to Luther. I'll stay, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I'll stay in the Schuyler mansion. If that's what it takes to end this, I'll do it. Luther didn't react at first, then a slow, satisfied smirk tugged at his lips. But I wasn't done. And when I give birth. My throat tightened. The Schuyler pack can have my child. The words felt like glass tearing through me. The air around us shifted. Even the protests outside seemed to quiet for a brief second, as if the weight of my sacrifice had settled over everyone. Luther looked at me, long and hard. Then, finally, he gave a slow nod. Deal. Vander stiffened beside me. Cheryl, no. I turned and walked away before he could stop me. I barely made it to Vander's car before my knees gave out. He caught me before I could collapse completely, his grip firm, steady, everything I wasn't in that moment. The tears came before I could stop them. I gave up my child, I choked out. I just handed my baby over to them like it was nothing. Vander's arms tightened around me, his voice low and calm. You didn't. You did what you thought was right. I shook my head against his chest, the sobs breaking free. How could this ever be right? He let me cry, holding me against him as if he could shield me from the pain. And for a moment, I let him. Minutes passed, maybe hours. Didn't know. All I knew was that by the time I finally pulled away, my face was damp, my body exhausted, and the crushing reality of what I had done was sinking in. This isn't just about safety, I whispered. If Luther claims the child is his, my baby will grow up confused. Torn between two packs. Between two men. I don't want that. Vander studied me for a long moment. Then reached out and wiped the tears from my cheek. Then I'll claim the child as mine. I'll be the father, he said simply. No one has to know the truth. Not Luther. Not the pack. I'll do whatever it takes to protect that baby from him. The sincerity in his voice made my chest tighten. But. No buts. His jaw clenched. I will stand as the father. I'll give that child a real home, a real family. Luther will never have the chance to take that away from you. More tears welled up in my eyes, but this time, they weren't from devastation. They were from something else entirely. Hope. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel completely alone. I nodded, unable to find the words. Vander just pulled me into another embrace, pressing a firm hand against the back of my head. We'll figure this out, he murmured. Together. But as I looked back at the mansion looming in the distance, I knew the hardest part was yet to come. Because tonight, I had to pack my things. And tomorrow, I had to walk back into that house and pretend I hadn't just sacrificed everything. 9 months. 9 months of feeling trapped in the Schuyler mansion. 9 months of being watched, whispered about, and ignored. 9 months of carrying the weight of a secret that could destroy everything. And now, I was about to bring a life into this world, a life that would never be free. A sharp pain tore through my stomach, and I gasped, gripping the bedpost for support. The contractions had started hours ago, but now they were unbearable. I barely had time to register the panic in Vander's voice before strong arms lifted me, carrying me toward the Schuyler clinic. Stay with me, Cheryl, Vander said, his voice tense. Just a little longer. I nodded weakly, my body drenched in sweat. The hallways blurred as we rushed through them, the pain twisting deep into my bones. But the moment we reached the clinic, my stomach dropped. The nurses didn't rush toward me. They didn't prepare a room. They didn't even acknowledge my presence. Instead, I heard frantic voices. Get her inside, now. I turned my head and saw Catherine being wheeled past me, her face contorted in pain. She was in labor, too. Everything stopped. "We don't have space," one of the nurses muttered. "Catherine goes first." I blinked. What? I was right here, barely holding myself together, yet they didn't care. They pushed Catherine into a private emergency room while I was left on the sidelines, barely able to stand. I heard Vander's voice rise. "She's in labor. She needs help now." A doctor sighed. "We'll get to her when we can." Something inside me snapped. Vander's entire body tensed. I saw the way his fists clenched, the way his eyes darkened with rage. "You think she's just going to wait?" His voice was dangerous now, controlled but filled with fury. "You think I'll let you treat her like this?" No one answered. They didn't have to. Their silence was enough. Vander didn't wait. He scooped me up and stormed out of the clinic. I heard the nurses call after him, but he didn't stop. His only focus was me. "Where are we going?" I gasped between contractions. "Somewhere they won't treat you like trash," he growled. And he did. Vander took me outside the Schuyler Pack to a trusted midwife, someone who didn't care about status or bloodlines. The moment we arrived, I was surrounded by warmth and care, something I hadn't felt in months. And there, after hours of unbearable pain, I brought my son into the world. The moment I heard his first cry, my heart shattered. "Elijah." I held him close, staring at his tiny features, his soft cries, his perfect little hands. He was so small, so delicate, yet he had already been born into a war. A tear slipped down my cheek as I pressed a kiss to his forehead. "I'm so sorry, my love." Vander sat beside me, exhaustion clear on his face, but he smiled. "He's beautiful, Cheryl." I forced myself to smile back, but there was a bitter edge to it. Because deep down, I knew the truth. Elijah was already a prisoner in the Schuyler name. And I was too weak to stop it. By the time we returned to the Schuyler mansion, my body was sore, but I held Elijah tightly against me. I wouldn't let anyone take him from me. The moment I stepped inside, I heard laughter, music, celebration. I turned my head toward the grand hall and saw the reason why. A massive banquet. A celebration. For Alpha, Luther, and Catherine's child. My chest ached as I watched the pack cheer, lift their glasses, and shower gifts for the new heir. Their son, Cale, they didn't even acknowledge me. No one even looked in my direction. My grip on Elijah tightened. They had made it clear my son didn't belong here. A slow clap broke through the noise, and when I turned, I saw Catherine standing near the center of the hall, a smirk playing on her lips. "Oh, how rude of me," she said loudly, voice dripping with sarcasm. "I nearly forgot. Cheryl has also given birth." The entire room fell into an awkward silence. Eyes turned to me, filled with nothing but judgment. Catherine's lips curled as she tilted her head. "Tell me, Cheryl. Should we also celebrate your bastard?" My heart stopped. Whispers erupted in the room. I could hear them. Feel them. Vander took a step forward, rage burning in his eyes, but I lifted a hand to stop him. No. This was mine to handle. I let out a slow breath, adjusting Elijah in my arms. "At least I didn't have to pretend to be a surrogate," I said, my voice calm but sharp. "Only to end up as a mistress." Catherine's smirk vanished. Her face twisted in rage as gasps filled the room. Tension crackled in the air. Before she could respond, a deep voice cut through the chaos. "Enough." The crowd immediately fell silent. "Luther." He stepped forward, his cold eyes scanning the room before landing on me. "You're ruining the celebration," he said flatly. I met his gaze, my body trembling with rage. "You ruined everything first." But I stayed silent. Luther's eyes flickered to the bundle in my arms, his expression unreadable. "What's his name?" he asked. A shiver ran down my spine. I knew this moment would come. I held my son closer, taking a deep breath. Elijah. For a second, just a second, I saw something flicker in Luther's gaze. A reaction. A hesitation. Then it was gone. He nodded. Congratulations. But I wasn't fooled. His eyes told me everything. He was skeptical. He was watching. And sooner or later, he would find out the truth. The sound of laughter and celebration echoed through the Schuyler mansion. But none of it was for me. I stood at the edge of the grand hall, watching as the pack members toasted to Cale's birth. The tables were filled with gifts, gold-trimmed blankets, finely woven clothes, and carved wooden toys meant for a prince. The women cooed over Catherine, praising her strength, her beauty, how she had given birth to the Schuyler pack's true heir. My fingers tightened around Elijah, who was wrapped snugly against my chest. My son. Unacknowledged. Uncelebrated. Forgotten. A sharp pain burned in my throat, but I forced it down. I wouldn't let them see how much it hurt. Elijah, I whispered against his soft forehead, you are not an outcast. He stirred slightly in his sleep, his tiny fingers curling against my skin. He didn't understand any of this, but one day, he would. One day. He would see how unfair the world had been to him before he even had a chance to prove himself. A faint vibration in my pocket snapped me out of my thoughts. I pulled out my phone and my heart clenched. A message from my mother. The Hilton pack is preparing a celebration for their grandson. Come home, Cheryl. My breath caught. They were throwing a celebration for Elijah. My people, they hadn't turned their backs on him. They hadn't let the lies and rumors poison their love. Tears pricked my eyes. Elijah, they're waiting for you, murmured. They want to celebrate you. I turned to Vander, showing him the message. He nodded, understanding immediately. We should ask permission to leave. The idea of asking Luther for permission made my stomach churn, but I had no choice. We found him at the far end of the hall, seated like a king on his throne. Catherine sat beside him, basking in the attention. Luther's gaze was cold the moment I approached. What do you want? He asked. I swallowed my pride. The Hilton pack has invited me home to celebrate my son. I need your permission to go. The silence stretched long and heavy. Luther's eyes flickered to Elijah, his expression unreadable. Then, with no emotion at all, he said, go. No argument. No threats, just that single, cold word. I didn't wait to question it. I turned on my heel and left, holding my son closer as Vander followed behind me. The Hilton pack had always been home, but this time, stepping onto their land felt different. The moment they saw me, they rushed forward, hands reaching out, not for me, but for Elijah. The future of our bloodline, one elder whispered, his eyes shining with warmth. Gifts were pressed into my arms. Soft blankets, protective charms, toys hand-carved with love. Tears blurred my vision. This was what he deserved. I turned to my parents, who stood at the center of it all. My mother's eyes were full of emotion, my father's lips pressed tight, trying to keep from breaking down. We will always welcome you here, my mother whispered, pressing a kiss to my forehead. I exhaled shakily. I know. But I had to make a choice. Elijah belongs to the Schuyler pack now. I can't bring him here as much as I want to. The pain of saying those words made my chest ache, but I had no choice. For a moment, my father looked like he wanted to argue, but then he nodded. Come whenever you can, he said, voice thick. Bring him to see his real family. I forced a smile. I will. For a while, I allowed myself to feel peace. To forget the world I had to return to. But then, I felt it. A sharp sensation like eyes burning into the back of my skull. I turned sharply, scanning the crowd, the trees beyond the pack house, but there was nothing. Yet, I knew someone was watching. A chill crawled up my spine, but I shook it off. Maybe it was just my paranoia. The ride back to the Schuyler mansion was quiet. By the time we arrived, exhaustion had settled deep into my bones. Vander carried Elijah upstairs while I followed behind, my thoughts heavy. Once in our room, I placed Elijah into his cradle, watching as his tiny chest rose and fell. My son. The only thing in this world that still felt pure. Vander sighed as he collapsed onto the bed, rubbing his temples. You should rest too, Cheryl. I didn't answer. Instead, I turned toward the terrace, drawn by the cool air outside. I needed space. I needed to breathe. Stepping out, I let my eyes wander over the quiet estate, trying to ground myself. And then I saw him. Across from me, on the adjacent terrace, stood Alpha Luther. My heart lurched. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking past me to where Elijah lay sleeping inside. The air shifted. Then, in the quiet of the night, his voice cut through the distance between us. That child of yours has a resemblance to me. A sharp inhale burned my throat, my fingers gripping the railing so hard they turned white. My pulse thundered in my ears. I forced myself to keep my face blank, to act like his words didn't shake me to my core. But deep inside, terror gripped me. Did he know? Had he already figured it out? I had learned to live with the suffocating air of the Schuyler mansion, the heavy stairs. The way people whispered when they thought I wasn't listening. The way they celebrated Cale Luther and Catherine's son while ignoring Elijah completely. Tonight was no different. The Schuyler pack was gathered in the grand hall, raising their glasses to the future heir, Cale, while my son, my Elijah, remained unseen. Unacknowledged. It shouldn't have hurt. I had prepared myself for this moment. But as I stood in the corner, watching everyone dote on Catherine's baby, rage curled inside me like fire. I forced myself to turn away. My son didn't need their validation. I had him. That was enough. Back in the nursery, the warmth of Elijah's tiny fingers wrapped around mine brought me a sense of calm. He was only days old, yet he had already been cast aside, labeled as lesser. My heart clenched at the thought of what his future would be like in this house. I whispered softly to him, pressing a kiss against his forehead. No matter what they say, you are mine. And I will never let them make you feel unwanted. Then the door creaked open. Catherine. She stood there, her silk dress flowing around her as she leaned against the doorway, arms crossed. There was no smirk this time. No fake pleasantries. Just a sharp, calculating look that made my stomach twist. You should leave, she said. I blinked. What? You heard me. She took slow steps inside, her eyes flickering toward Elijah's cradle before landing back on me. Take your son and get out of here before something happens to him. My breath caught. It wasn't just a suggestion. It was a warning. I straightened, squaring my shoulders. Why do you even care? Demanded. You have Luther. You have your son. Why are you so desperate to push me away? For a second, just a second, something flickered across her face. Fear? Guilt? But then it was gone, replaced by the usual cruelty in her eyes. Because you don't belong here, she said coldly. And neither does your son. This pack will never accept him, Cheryl. No matter what you do, he will always be an outcast. My nails dug into my palms. And why does that bother you so much? If he's just a bastard, why are you so threatened? Catherine inhaled sharply, lips parting, but she didn't speak. There it was again. That moment of hesitation. Something wasn't right. Why was she so desperate? Why was she pushing so hard? It wasn't just about pack status. It was something else. She took a step closer, voice lowering. Luther is watching you, she whispered. He's already doubting. Do you really think you can keep this up forever? He's not stupid, Cheryl. If I were you, I'd leave before he starts putting the pieces together. A chill ran through me. I hated the way my heart stuttered. The way fear twisted deep in my stomach. Catherine smirked. Just think about then. She turned on her heel and walked out, leaving behind a suffocating silence. I stood there, Elijah's soft breaths the only thing anchoring me to reality. Luther was watching me. He was doubting. And for the first time since I lied about Elijah's father, I wasn't sure how much longer I could keep the truth buried. That night, I barely slept. Catherine's words had latched onto me like poison, spreading into every thought. Luther was watching. He was questioning things. I couldn't afford to slip, not when my son's future depended on it. I sat in the dim glow of the nursery, gently rocking Elijah in my arms, trying to quiet the storm inside me. I would protect him. No matter what. The sound of the wind rattling against the windows made me shiver. Every creak, every shadow outside the window made me feel like someone was there. Watching. A knock at the door made me freeze. My pulse hammered. It was past midnight. Who the hell would? Another knock. Slow. Deliberate. I swallowed hard, shifting Elijah against me as I stood. My fingers trembled as I reached for the door handle and pulled it open. My breath caught. Alpha Luther stood there. Alone, the candlelight in the hall cast dark shadows across his face, making his expression unreadable. His eyes flickered to Elijah, who stirred slightly in my arms but didn't wake. Luther didn't speak right away. He just stood there, staring. Studying. I felt my stomach twist into knots. Was this it? Had he finally figured it out? Then, in a voice so quiet it sent shivers down my spine, he finally said, "I need to see him." I tightened my hold on Elijah instinctively. Does he know? Had he already pieced it together? Or was this another cruel test? Luther's eyes met mine, piercing, unwavering. "Let me see him, Cheryl." I took a step back, my breath coming in short, uneven gasps. "Why?" His jaw clenched. He looked at Elijah again, then back at me, his gaze darkening. "Because I need to know." My knees felt weak. My heartbeat thundered in my ears. This was bad. This was very bad. If Luther was already suspecting, how much longer until he knew? Elijah stirred in my arms, his tiny fist clenching around my shirt. I could feel the warmth of his body against mine, the fragile weight of him, the life I had sworn to protect. I had lied. I had manipulated. I had done everything in my power to keep Luther from taking him. But now, as Luther stood there, waiting, I realized I was running out of time. Luther stood in front of me. His expression unreadable as always. His presence alone filled the room with a suffocating weight, but it was his words that made my stomach twist. "Hand him over," he said, his voice calm, controlled. Too controlled. I tightened my arms around Elijah, feeling the warmth of his small body against me. He was sleeping soundly, unaware of the storm brewing around him. I swallowed, trying to steady my voice. "Why?" Luther tilted his head slightly, watching me with those sharp, calculating eyes. "I want to introduce him to my allies. Let them see my nephew." His nephew. I almost laughed at the absurdity. I lifted my chin. "Why would you waste time flaunting a bastard?" My voice came out sharper than I intended, but I didn't care. "You and your pack don't even acknowledge him." Something flickered in his eyes, something dark and unreadable. He didn't answer immediately, and for a moment, the silence between us felt like a battle of wills. Then, without another word, he turned and walked away. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. My grip on Elijah tightened as I looked down at his peaceful face. My baby. My son. The only thing in this cursed place that was truly mine. I turned back to bed, where Vander was still sleeping, his breathing steady. He had been exhausted lately, staying up to make sure we were safe. I didn't want to wake him. So I held Elijah closer and let myself enjoy this fleeting moment of peace. The next morning. Breakfast at the Schuyler mansion was always suffocating. I sat at the far end of the long table, cradling a cup of tea in my hands as I listened to the elders discuss the future of the pack. As the future heir, Cale will be trained to lead from the moment he takes his first steps, one of them said proudly. Of course, Catherine chimed in, her voice sickeningly sweet. He will be the strongest alpha the Schuyler pack has ever seen. She turned to Luther, smiling. Won't he, darling? Luther didn't reply, merely giving her a curt nod. I kept my eyes on my cup, refusing to engage. This wasn't my battle. I had no reason to fight for a position that had nothing to do with me or my son. Unlike some children, Catherine continued, her voice dropping just low enough for only me to hear. Cale is meant to lead. I ignored her. I wouldn't give her the satisfaction of a reaction. I felt her eyes linger on me, waiting, provoking. When I didn't respond, she scoffed and turned her attention back to the elders, continuing to sing praises about her son. After breakfast, I needed a moment to clear my head. The mansion was large in most days. I wandered its halls just to feel like I had some semblance of control over my life. Today was no different. As I walked, I remembered there were some things I needed from the storage room. I turned down a quieter hallway, the scent of dust and old wood filling my nose. Then, I heard a voice. I froze, pressing myself against the wall as I strained to listen. The door to the storage room was slightly open, just enough for me to hear Catherine's hushed conversation. Luther will never know the truth, she was saying, her voice sharp and urgent. Just need to secure my place long enough to take everything. I felt my breath catch in my throat. What truth? I pressed closer, my mind racing. Was she lying to Luther? About what? What was she trying to take? My heart pounded as I tried to put the pieces together. Cale. She had been pushing so hard to make sure everyone accepted him as the future heir. She had been more aggressive, more desperate lately. Was it because Cale wasn't Luther's son? A cold realization settled in my chest, making it hard to breathe. Before I could process it fully, the door creaked. Catherine was coming out. I stepped back quickly, slipping into the shadows just as she exited the room. My heart hammered against my ribs as I pressed myself against the cold stone wall, praying she wouldn't see me. She paused, glancing down the hall. For a moment, I thought she had sensed me. But then she sighed and walked away, her heels clicking against the marble floors. I waited until she was gone before releasing the breath I had been holding. My hands trembled at my sides. I had suspected Catherine was hiding something. But now, I was sure. And if Luther ever found out? I swallowed hard, forcing myself to move. I had to be careful. If Catherine was desperate enough to lie about something this big, then she was dangerous. And if she saw me as a threat, I didn't even want to think about what she would do. I had to protect Elijah. No matter what. That night, I couldn't sleep. Vander had passed out beside me exhausted from the day's events. Elijah lay safely in his cradle, his tiny breaths steady and even. I should have felt at ease. But I wasn't. My mind kept replaying Catherine's words. The way she had spoken. The desperation in her tone. What was she planning? And more importantly, what would happen if Luther found out? The moment I heard Catherine's voice through that door yesterday, something inside me shifted. There was always something off about her, but now I knew she was hiding something. Luther will not know that it isn't his child. The words wouldn't leave my head. They wrapped around my thoughts like a noose, tightening every time I saw her fake smiles and perfect little act. If Cale wasn't Luther's, then whose child was he? And why was Catherine so desperate to keep it a secret? I needed to find out. But I had to be careful. One wrong move, and she would know I was onto her. The next morning, I forced myself to act normally. Catherine sat across from me at breakfast, holding Kale in her arms, feeding him with an overly sweet smile. The elders discussed the future of the Schuyler pack, their voices heavy with importance. The future heir must be strong, well-trained, and worthy, one of them said, nodding toward Kale. Catherine beamed. Kale is strong, just like his father. He will be the best heir this pack has ever seen. I said nothing, just focused on my plate, forcing myself to ignore the smugness in her tone. If I reacted, she would see it as a challenge. And right now I needed to remain invisible. Vander sat beside me, one hand resting protectively on Elijah's back as our son slept against him. My heart clenched at the sight. As long as my son is safe, nothing else matters. But deep down, I knew that wasn't true. Because Catherine was hiding something, and whatever it was, it could destroy the fragile peace I had built for Elijah. By midday, I began my quiet investigation. The first step was talking to the maids. I approached them casually, making sure not to seem suspicious. Did Catherine always stay here before she got pregnant? I asked one of the older maids. She hesitated, glancing around before lowering her voice. Oh no, she left for a little while. A few months, I think. My fingers tensed. Why? No one really knows, but I heard she went far away. To a village where women go when they need help. Help? I forced a smile and nodded, but inside, my mind was racing. Catherine had fertility issues. So how did she suddenly return pregnant with Kale? It didn't make sense. That night, when the mansion was quiet, I made my move. The records room was in the west wing, past a long corridor lined with portraits of the Schuyler ancestors. Their eyes seemed to follow me as I slipped through the shadows. When I reached the door, I tested the handle. Locked. Of course. I reached into my pocket, pulling out a thin pin. An old habit, one I never thought I'd need again. The lock clicked open within seconds. I slipped inside, closing the door behind me. The air was thick with the scent of old parchment and dust. Shelves lined the walls, filled with records dating back decades. My heart pounded as I searched, my fingers flipping through files. I found Kale's birth records first. Everything seemed normal until I noticed something strange. A medical report. Catherine's last recorded treatment before she got pregnant. My breath caught. She had been treated for infertility. The words blurred as I read them over and over again, my hands shaking. Then, I found something worse. A letter. From an unknown sender. Catherine, you don't have to worry. The child is strong. No one will ever suspect a thing. My stomach dropped. Kale wasn't Luther's son. Catherine had lied. I had to tell Vander. I had to. The door creaked open. I froze. A shadow moved in the doorway. My pulse skyrocketed. Slowly, I turned. Catherine stood there, her arms crossed, her lips curled into a knowing smile. Snooping around, are we? Her voice was soft, but the thread in it was sharp as a knife. I shoved the letter behind my back. I was just what? She stepped inside, closing the door behind her with a quiet click. Looking for something? I swallowed hard. My mind raced for an excuse, but before I could answer, she grabbed my wrist, her nails digging into my skin. You should have stayed out of this, Cheryl, she whispered. Something dark flickered in her eyes. Something dangerous. I yanked my hand away, stepping back. Why are you so scared, Catherine? I asked, my voice steady. Afraid of what I might find. Her expression didn't change. If anything, her grip on control only tightened. You're pathetic, she sighed. You really think anyone would believe you over me? You, the woman who lied about her child's father? I flinched, but I didn't back down. She took a step closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. I suggest you disappear before something happens to you. Or your son. A cold wave of fear crashed over me. She wasn't just warning me. She was threatening me. My hands clenched into fists. Why are you so desperate? I demanded. You have Luther. You have everything you wanted. Why are you so threatened by me? For the first time, something flashed in her eyes. And that's when I knew. She was hiding something else. Before I could press her further, the lights suddenly went out. Darkness swallowed the room. I barely had time to react before I felt her hands shove me back. My body hit the shelf behind me, sending papers and books crashing to the floor. I gasped, struggling to regain balance. But when the lights flickered back on, Catherine was gone. And so was the letter. She leaned against her vanity, arms crossed, a satisfied smirk curling her lips. Took you long enough, she mused. I didn't waste time. How long did you think you could fool everyone? My voice was steady, but my heart was hammering. You lied to Alpha Luther. You tricked the entire Schuyler pack. Cale isn't even his child, is he? Her smirk didn't falter. If anything, she looked amused. So what if he isn't, she replied smoothly, flicking an imaginary speck of dust from her sleeve. Luther believes he is. And belief, dear sister, is all that matters. I clenched my fists. You're disgusting. Catherine's expression darkened. And you're naive. She stepped closer, her voice dropping. What exactly do you plan to do with this little revelation, Cheryl? Run to Luther? Tell him everything? I lifted my chin. He deserves to know the truth. Her laugh was sharp, like a blade slicing through my resolve. Oh, please. Even if he did believe you, do you think he'd forgive you for lying about Elijah? You claimed Vander was the father. What happens when he starts questioning that lie? My breath caught. She knew exactly where to strike. But I wouldn't back down. At least I didn't lie for greed, I shot back. You don't even love Luther. You just want his power, his wealth. Catherine tilted her head, mockingly thoughtful. Love? What a childish notion. Power and wealth are love, Cheryl. And I don't intend to lose either. Then her smirk faded, replaced by something colder. But you? You have something to lose. The shift in her tone sent chills down my spine. What are you talking about? Her gaze flickered downward, as if she could see straight into my soul. That sweet little boy of yours. My stomach twisted. Don't you dare. Oh, but I will. Catherine's voice was sickeningly soft, almost affectionate. If you even think about ruining what I have, Cheryl, accidents can happen. A fall down the stairs. A door left open in the cold. A wolf attack. She sighed. Babies are so fragile. Rage burned inside me, but it was nothing compared to the fear clawing at my chest. She was serious. She wasn't just trying to scare me, she was making a promise. I forced my voice to stay steady. You're a monster. She leaned in, her breath brushing against my ear. And you're a mother. So, make your choice, Cheryl. Stay quiet, and Elijah stays safe. Or run your mouth, and see what happens. I felt sick. Trapped. But there was no choice, was there? Elijah came first. Always. Catherine straightened, flashing me a satisfied smile. Good talk, she chirped, strolling past me toward the door. Now, let's go enjoy dinner, shall we? The Schuyler dining hall was grand and suffocating all at once. Chandeliers glowed overhead, the clink of silverware against fine china filling the room. I barely tasted my food. Every bite felt like swallowing glass. Across from me, Catherine was the perfect Luna, gracious, smiling, playing her role flawlessly. If I didn't know the truth, I might have believed she was genuine. I stared down at my plate, my hands trembling under the table. My mind was racing, filled with Catherine's threats. Stay quiet, and Elijah stays safe. Vander sat beside me, his arm brushing against mine as he reached for his drink. He hadn't noticed anything off yet, but I could feel his sharp instincts picking up on my tension. He glanced at me briefly, his brows slightly furrowed, but he didn't say anything. Then, Alpha Luther entered. The entire room seemed to shift. Conversations quieted, backs straightened. He was always a force, but tonight, something about him felt sharper. He took his seat at the head of the table, exuding effortless dominance. His gaze swept over everyone before finally settling on me. I froze. He was watching me too closely. Too intently. My pulse pounded as his eyes narrowed slightly. Then, in a voice only I could hear, he leaned in and murmured, "What's wrong?" The air left my lungs. Catherine's warning echoed in my mind. Stay quiet, and Elijah stays safe. I could feel her watching me from across the table. I didn't dare look at her, but I knew she was daring me to speak. Luther was still waiting. His patience was razor thin. I swallowed hard, my entire body rigid. I wanted to expose Catherine for what she was. I glanced at Elijah, cradled safely in Vander's arms. His tiny face was peaceful, unaware of the danger surrounding him. I couldn't risk it. So, I forced my lips into a tight smile and shook my head. "Nothing," I whispered. Luther didn't look convinced. His gaze lingered, searching mine, as if he could see the war raging inside me. Then, just as I thought I could breathe again, Catherine spoke. "Oh, Alpha," she said sweetly. "Cheryl and I had such an interesting conversation earlier." My blood ran cold. Luther's gaze snapped to her. "Oh?" Catherine tilted her head, eyes twinkling with hidden malice. She was just so fascinated with Cale, she mused. Kept asking about his birth, his father. She giggled lightly. Almost as if she suspected something. Luther's stare sharpened. "Is that so?" I opened my mouth to deny it, but I was too slow. Catherine leaned in, her voice just low enough for only me to hear. "One wrong word, Cheryl," she murmured, her smile never faltering. "And you'll never see your son again." I gripped the table, my nails digging into the wood. Luther was still waiting for my response. I swallowed hard and forced a weak chuckle. "I was just curious," I lied. "That's all." He didn't look convinced. Catherine smirked, victorious. Catherine had been so smug, so confident in her threats. "If you tell anyone, you'll lose your child." I knew she wasn't bluffing. She was desperate enough to go to extreme lengths to protect her secret. And now, I was trapped in it, forced into silence while she played her sick little game. I clenched my fists. No. I wouldn't let her win. But what could I do? Run away? No, it was impossible. Catherine had too much influence in this pack, and she would hunt me down before I even got past the borders. Tell Luther? I wanted to goddess, I wanted to. He deserved to know that the son he adored wasn't even his. But Catherine had made sure I wouldn't dare. I let out a shaky breath. I was stuck. Cheryl. I flinched, my head snapping toward Vander. He was sitting up in bed now, his eyes heavy with exhaustion but sharp with concern. I hadn't even realized how restless I'd been, pacing back and forth like a caged animal. "What's wrong?" Vander asked, his voice low but firm. I hesitated. For a moment, I considered lying. Telling him it was nothing, that I was just tired. But the weight of Catherine's threats was too much to carry alone. I crossed the room in quick strides and grabbed Vander's wrist, dragging him toward the corner of the room. "Cheryl, what?" "Catherine," I whispered harshly, cutting him off. "She's been lying to everyone." Vander frowned. "What are you talking about?" I swallowed hard. Cale isn't Luther's son. Catherine can't have children. She's infertile. Vander's entire body went rigid. What? His voice was sharp, laced with disbelief. She hired someone, I said, my pulse pounding. She bought a child just so she could secure her place as Luna. For a moment, Vander didn't move then, slowly, his expression darkened, his jaw tightening. We need to tell Luther. His voice was deadly calm. No, I said immediately, shaking my head. His eyes snapped at mine. Cheryl, this is. I know how serious this is, I interrupted, my voice breaking. But if we tell him now, Catherine will retaliate. And she won't come for me, she'll come for Elijah. Vander cursed under his breath, running a hand through his hair. His entire body was tense, vibrating with restrained anger. She threatened you? His voice was dangerously low. I nodded. She said if I spoke a word I'd lose my son. Vander exhaled sharply, pacing. That woman is insane. She's desperate, I muttered. And desperate people are dangerous. He turned to me, his gaze hard. Then what do we do? Because we can't just sit back and let her get away with this. I bit my lip, my hands clenching at my sides. I don't know. My voice cracked. I don't know what to do. I can't live like this, living in lies, living in fear. Vander was silent for a moment. Then, finally, he sighed and stepped closer, gripping my shoulders. Listen to me. Until we figure this out, you don't let Elijah out of your sight. I don't care what it takes, he stays with you at all times. I nodded. She won't touch him, Vander swore. Not while I'm here. I wanted to believe him. I needed to. But the paranoia was already sinking in, poisoning my thoughts. I turned back to Elijah's cradle, brushing a soft curl from his forehead. He was so small, so innocent. I had to protect him. No matter what. The room suddenly felt suffocating, the walls closing in on me. I need some air, I mumbled. Vander gave me a concerned look but nodded. Don't go far. I stepped onto the terrace, gripping the railing as the cool night air kissed my skin. I took deep breaths, trying to shove down the rising panic in my chest. The Schuyler mansion was quiet. Too quiet. The whole pack had gone to sleep. But still, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Slowly, I turned my head, scanning the darkness. And that's when I saw him. Luther. He stood on the opposite terrace, his hands resting on the railing, his eyes locked onto me. For a moment, neither of us spoke. His expression was unreadable, but something about the way he looked at me, I felt my entire body freeze, my grip tightening on the railing as my heartbeat slammed against my ribs. Had he figured it out? Did he suspect? Or was he just making an observation? I forced myself to breathe, to school my expression into something neutral, but I knew my eyes betrayed me. Luther took a slow step closer, his piercing gaze locked onto mine like a predator watching its prey. Cheryl. His voice was deceptively calm. Is there something you want to tell me? I felt my throat tighten, the weight of his question suffocating. Catherine's words echoed in my mind. I couldn't say it. So, I did the only thing I could. I forced a small, bitter smile and whispered, why would I have anything to say? Luther didn't answer right away. He just stood there, studying me, the tension stretching between us like a thin thread ready to snap. Then, he let out a quiet chuckle, shaking his head before turning away. But just before he disappeared back inside, he muttered. We'll see about that. The morning was unsettling. A thick, suffocating weight sat in my chest, but I ignored it, thinking it was just exhaustion from the previous night's dinner. I had barely slept, my mind plagued with thoughts of Catherine's threats and Luther's unsettling presence. Then, the message arrived. A messenger from the Hilton pack stood at the entrance of the Schuyler estate, his face pale with urgency. Lady Cheryl, it's your parents, he said breathlessly. They're sick. My stomach plummeted. What? My voice came out in a whisper, almost drowned by the rushing blood in my ears. They suddenly collapsed this morning. The beta believes something is wrong with the water supply. A sickening realization crept up my spine. Poison. Someone had poisoned the Hilton Pack's water. Luther. Or Catherine. It had to be one of them. I spun on my heel and rushed back inside. Vander was holding Elijah in his arms, rocking him gently, oblivious to the storm raging inside me. When he saw my face, his expression shifted immediately. "What's wrong?" I hesitated, looking between him and my son. I didn't want to leave. I hated the thought of being apart from Elijah, especially now, when I felt danger pressing in from all sides. But my parents. "I have to go," I said, my voice shaking. "My parents are sick. Something happened to the Hilton Pack's water supply." Vander frowned, his grip on Elijah tightening. "Cheryl, be careful." "I will," I promised. I turned to my baby, pressing a lingering kiss to his soft forehead. "Mama will be back soon, okay?" Vander gave me a reassuring nod. "I'll take care of him. You don't have to worry." I exhaled slowly. I trusted him. And so, I left. The moment I arrived at the Hilton Pack, I knew something was wrong. The entire pack was eerily quiet. Not the usual hum of conversation, not the soft rustling of movement. Just silence. Heavy. Unnatural. I rushed toward my parents' home, my heart hammering against my ribs. When I pushed open the door, the sight before me nearly knocked the breath from my lungs. They were both in bed, their faces deathly pale, their breaths labored. My mother, usually so strong, looked fragile and weak. My father, always a pillar of unwavering strength, barely had the energy to turn his head toward me. I dropped to my knees beside them. "What happened?" "The water," the beta murmured from behind me. I turned, my body rigid. "What do you mean?" "Something was put in it," he said grimly. "We don't know what yet, but it only affected the elders." A calculated attack. A spark of rage ignited deep within me. This wasn't some accident, this was intentional. And I only had two suspects: Luther and Catherine. Who else would do something this cruel? Who else had the power to orchestrate something so vile? My fingers curled into fists. They were trying to destroy me. I couldn't stay here. I had to get back. I had to make sure my son was safe. I kissed my mother's forehead, whispered reassurances to my father, and stood. "I'll be back," I promised. "I'm going to find out who did this." And then, I ran. I rushed back to the Schuyler mansion, my pulse pounding in my ears. Something felt wrong. The moment I stepped into the bedroom, my entire world collapsed. Vander was on the floor. Unmoving. I couldn't even scream. I just ran to him, falling to my knees, shaking him desperately. "Vander." My voice was high-pitched, frantic. His skin was warm, his chest rising in shallow breaths, but he wasn't waking up. Then, I turned. The cradle was empty. My breath hitched. My vision blurred. Elijah was gone. I ripped the blankets apart, my hands trembling as I searched every inch of the room, as if my son could be hiding somewhere, as if this was some kind of horrible nightmare. But it wasn't. Someone had taken him. My body moved before my mind could even process it. I stumbled to my feet, running down the hallways, gasping for breath, my heart slamming against my ribs like it was trying to escape. There was only one person who could help me now. Alpha Luther. I burst into his office, my lungs burning, my body shaking violently. He was sitting there calmly, completely unfazed, as if the world hadn't just been ripped from beneath my feet. "My son is missing," I gasped. "Luther, please, someone took Elijah." Luther didn't even blink. His golden eyes were cold, void of emotion. "That child isn't mine." The words hit me like a slap to the face. What? My voice cracked. He leaned back in his chair, unbothered. Why should I waste my time looking for him? I stared at him. A part of me always knew he was cruel. But this? This was inhuman. Tears burned behind my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. I would not break in front of him. Luther, I whispered, my voice barely holding together. He's just a baby. His lips twitched into a lazy smirk. You should be more careful, Cheryl, he murmured. If someone took your child, maybe you should ask yourself why. My stomach twisted violently. The poisoned water. Elijah's disappearance. This wasn't random. This was planned. And there was only one person capable of something this monstrous. Catherine. My breathing grew ragged. My nails dug into my palms so hard I thought I might start bleeding. I had to find my son. Before it was too late. There was no other way. No more secrets. No more hiding. I looked at Alpha Luther, my heart slamming against my ribs. My hands trembled, my breath uneven, but I forced the words out before fear could stop me. Elijah is your son. The room went still. For a second, I wasn't even sure he had heard me. But then, slowly, Luther turned to face me. What? His voice was low, dangerous. My fingers curled into fists at my sides. I lied. Elijah is yours. The silence between us was suffocating. His jaw clenched so tight I thought it might shatter, his shoulders rising and falling with his ragged breathing. His golden eyes, so cold and sharp, pinned me to the spot like a knife pressed against my throat. Say that again. His voice was ever quieter now, but that only made it worse. I swallowed hard, my voice barely above a whisper. Elijah is your son Luther. His nostrils flared. He took a slow, measured breath, as if forcing himself to stay in control. You let me believe he cut himself off, exhaling sharply. His fists clenched at his sides, the veins in his arms bulging as if he were holding himself back from destroying everything in his path. I didn't know I was pregnant when left, I rushed out, desperate to explain. When I found out, it was too late. You were already with Catherine. I had no choice but to keep it a secret. No choice? Luther let out a bitter laugh. You had a choice, Cheryl. And you chose to lie to me. You let me think Vander was his father? You let me. He ran a hand through his hair, his entire body shaking with fury. I was hurt, I admitted, my voice breaking. I heard you with Catherine that night, Luther. I heard everything. You betrayed me. His eyes darkened. You expect me to come running back to you? I continued. To tell you was carrying your child while you were in bed with her? My throat tightened. You had already replaced me. You made that choice. His jaw clenched. That's not an excuse to keep my son from me. I know, I whispered. But I was scared. I thought it was the right thing at the time. Luther's expression twisted with something unreadable. You let another man claim my son. Vander helped me, I admitted. He was there for me when no one else was. Luther's lip curled. Of course, he was. This isn't about Vander, I snapped. This is about Elijah. He's missing, Luther. I took a shaky breath. And I know who took him. His entire body stiffened. It was Catherine, I said, my voice trembling. She took him. A muscle ticked in his jaw, but he didn't speak. She's been lying to you from the start, I pushed on. Cale isn't yours. She never even gave birth. She paid someone else to carry him. The fury in his eyes burned hotter, but there was something else now, hesitation. She's infertile, Luther, I said, driving the words in deep. She's been fooling you. She doesn't care about you. She never did. All she wants is the Skylar Pack's power, the wealth, the control. And now, she's using our son to get it. Luther inhaled sharply. His hands curled into fists. Then, without hesitation, he turned, his voice snapping through the room like a whip. Beta. Sentinel. His men appeared instantly, eyes sharp and alert. Find Catherine, he commanded, his voice colder than ice. No one leaves this territory. No one gets in. I want every guard, every scout searching for my son. Now. They nodded and disappeared. Luther turned back to me, his expression unreadable. If what you say is true, Cheryl, then I will deal with her. I barely had time to react before my phone rang. The moment I saw the caller ID, my stomach dropped. Catherine. My blood turned to ice as I answered. Her voice slithered through the speaker, sweet and poisonous. Cheryl, she cooed. You've been a very bad girl. My hands trembled. Where is he? I demanded, my voice cracking. Where is my son? Catherine chuckled softly. Oh, don't worry. He's perfectly safe. For now. My entire body went rigid. If you want to see him again, she continued, make Luther give me everything. The wealth, the power, the Skylar pack. Do that, and you'll have your baby back. If not. My breath caught. Then I suppose you'll have to say goodbye to little Elijah. The call ended. The phone slipped from my fingers. My legs gave out. Luther caught me before I hit the ground, but I barely felt his hands on my shoulders, barely registered the way his grip tightened, shaking me slightly. What did she say? I looked up at him, my vision blurred with unshed tears. She wants everything, I whispered. Or she'll kill him. The walls felt like they were closing in. My breath came in short, shallow gasps as I stared at the phone in Luther's grip. He had just transferred the money, a ridiculous, infuriating amount. All to satisfy Catherine's greed. Luther's jaw was tight, his eyes burning with barely contained rage as he set his phone down. She has the money, he muttered. Now she has no excuse. But deep down, we both knew Catherine would never stop at just money. My hands trembled as I clenched them into fists, nails digging into my palms. Vander, now fully awake after being drugged, sat beside me. His expression was unreadable, but I could feel the tension rolling off him in waves. She won't return Elijah, Vander finally said, breaking the silence. I turned to him sharply, my throat dry. What do you mean? He exhaled. Catherine doesn't just want wealth, she wants control. She's not going to let him go just because Luther paid up. My stomach twisted at his words. As much as I wanted to deny it, I knew he was right. Then the phone rang. I lunged for it before Luther could, my fingers fumbling over the screen as I answered. Catherine, I breathed. Please, just tell me, where is Elijah? A cruel, amused laugh greeted me at the other end. Oh, Cheryl. How pathetic you sound. Catherine, Luther's voice was sharp as steel. The deal was made. I gave you what you wanted. Now, return my son. Your son, she scoffed. You didn't even want him before. Luther's expression darkened. Don't test me, Catherine. A soft rustling sound crackled over the phone. Then a small, heart-wrenching cry rang out through the speaker. Elijah. My blood turned to ice. My knees nearly buckled. Stop it. I screamed. Don't you dare hurt him. Catherine chuckled. Hurt him? Oh, Cheryl, I wouldn't dream of it. But you see, as long as I don't get everything I deserve, I'm keeping him with me. So, you better start working on getting me more. Luther's grip on the table tightened until the wood groaned under his fingers. You're digging your own grave, Catherine, he growled. She's scared. Now, Alpha. No threats, or I might just forget to feed the little pup. Something inside me shattered. You monster, I choked. You took my baby. You stole him, and now you're using him as leverage. The line went dead. I stood there, the silence pressing against my skull. My chest felt like it was caving in. Then collapsed onto my knees. A choked sob ripped from my throat as the realization hit me like a brutal storm. Elijah was out there, in her hands, and I had no idea if he was safe. Vander crouched beside me, gripping my shoulders. "Cheryl, listen to me," he said firmly. "We will get him back." Luther was already barking orders to his beta, demanding every pack member search for Catherine. His entire body was tense, a ticking time bomb of fury. But I knew this wasn't enough. Catherine was smart. She had planned this for too long to be careless now. That's when it hit me. I pushed off the floor so fast Vander stumbled back. My mind raced as pieces of my memory clicked together. A place. A hidden place. I turned to them both, my voice shaking but certain. "I know where she might be." Luther's head snapped up. "What?" I swallowed hard. "There's a place Catherine used to go when we were kids. She always ran there when she wanted to be alone, when she wanted to hide." Vander was already on his feet. "Where?" "The forest," I whispered. "There's a small, abandoned house deep in the woods. We have to go. Now." Luther didn't waste another second. "Let's move." We tore through the pack house, moving swiftly into the night. The second we stepped into the forest, the air changed. The stillness was suffocating, the darkness thick and unrelenting. Every step felt like an eternity, my heart hammering against my ribs. A branch snapped behind me, and I whirled around, every nerve on high alert. But it was just Vander, his expression grim as he kept up with our pace. We moved deeper into the forest, the moon barely providing enough light to see the path ahead. My breathing was uneven, my thoughts racing. Then, a cry. Faint. Barely audible. But I knew that cry. My breath hitched. My pulse spiked. "Elijah," I gasped. We weren't far. I broke into a sprint, branches scratching against my arms, my lungs burning. We were close. So close. Then, just as the old house came into view, a gunshot rang through the air. I froze. The world seemed to slow, the ringing in my ears drowning out everything else. My heart pounded violently against my chest, a sickening wave of fear crashing over me. Luther cursed under his breath, grabbing my arm and shoving me behind him as we ducked behind a thick tree trunk. Vander pulled out a knife, his eyes scanning the area. The silence stretched, agonizing and suffocating. Then, a rustle. Footsteps. Someone was coming. I held my breath, my entire body trembling. Had we been too late? Another cry. "Elijah." I clenched my fists, my nails digging into my skin. I couldn't afford to freeze, not now. "Stay close," Luther whispered, his voice barely audible. "We end this tonight." And as the footsteps drew closer, I braced myself for what was to come. The forest was suffocatingly quiet, the kind of silence that only comes before disaster. My heart hammered in my chest as I followed behind Luther and Vander, our steps careful but urgent. Somewhere ahead, beyond the thick trees and tangled roots, my son was waiting for me, terrified, stolen. I bolted forward before I could think. But Vander grabbed my arm, holding me back. "Careful," he warned, his golden eyes scanning the area. "It's a trap." And he was right. The second we took another step, figures emerged from the shadows. Rogues. At least a dozen of them, their eyes glowing in the moonlight, their bodies tense and hungry for blood. I sucked in a sharp breath, already knowing who was behind this. And then, from behind them, she stepped forward. Catherine. She looked untouched, unbothered, as if this was all some sick game she was playing. And in her arms, swaddled in a thin blanket, was my baby. "Elijah," I choked out, feeling my knees almost give out beneath me. Catherine smirked. You really came all this way for him? You're a fool, Cheryl. Luther's growl rumbled through the air, his rage barely contained. Hand him over. Catherine. She laughed, rocking my baby in her arms like he was some prize. Why would I? I rather like having leverage. Something inside me snapped. I lunged for her, but the rogues were faster. One tackled me to the ground, my back slamming into the dirt, knocking the air from my lungs. Vander and Luther didn't wait. The second I hit the around, they attacked. The battle exploded around me. Luther tore through rogues like a beast unleashed, his claws slicing through them like they were nothing. Vander moved with precise brutality, his strikes sharp and calculated. But I didn't care about the battle, I only cared about Elijah. I scrambled to my feet, dodging an incoming rogue and slashing at him with the dagger I had hidden in my belt. He stumbled back, and I didn't wait to finish him. My focus was on Catherine, who was already trying to slip away in the chaos. Not this time. I ran after her, pushing past the fighting, shoving away any rogue that dared to block my path. My lungs burned, my legs ached, but I didn't stop. I couldn't. Catherine. I screamed. She turned sharply, glaring at me before bolting into the trees, Elijah still in her arms. I followed. The forest blurred around me, branches slashing at my skin as I chased her down. I wasn't fast enough, I was losing her. But then, she made a mistake. She tripped on a root, stumbling forward, her grip on Elijah loosening for just a second. And that second was all I needed. I lunged, grabbing onto her wrist and yanking her back with every ounce of strength I had. She shrieked, twisting in my grasp, but I wasn't letting go. Give me my son. I snarled. She clawed at my hands, thrashing wildly, but I held firm, fighting her with every ounce of fury in my body. And then, in a desperate move, she let go. Elijah slipped from her arms. Time slowed. My heart stopped. I dived forward, catching him just before he hit the ground. I cradled him to my chest, my whole body trembling, my breath coming in sharp gasps. He was safe. My baby was safe. Catherine stumbled back, realizing she had lost. Her eaves darted around wildly, looking for an escape. But there was none. The battle was over. Luther and Vander stood amidst the bodies of the fallen rogues, blood splattered across their faces, their chests rising and falling with heavy breaths. Catherine was alone now. She collapsed to her knees, her entire body shaking. And then, to my disgust, she crawled toward Luther, reaching for him with trembling hands. Luther, she whispered, her voice breaking. Please. I was desperate. I didn't mean. He looked at her like she was nothing. Like she was worse than nothing. You stole my son, he said, his voice eerily calm. You lied to me. You betrayed me. Catherine sobbed. I can fix this. Please. Luther's claws extended, his entire body radiating murderous intent. He was going to end her. And maybe she deserved it. But something inside me hesitated. She was a monster, a manipulative, vile creature who had done everything in her power to ruin me, to take my child, to destroy everything I loved. But if Luther killed her now, would that make us any different from her? I took a shaky breath. No, I whispered. Luther didn't move. I stepped forward, Elijah still in my arms, and met Luther's gaze. Let her live. Let her rot in prison. She deserves to suffer for what she's done. Catherine's eyes widened, as if she had expected mercy. But this wasn't mercy. This was a life sentence. Luther's gaze darkened, but after a moment, he gave a sharp nod to his warriors. Take her away. Catherine screamed as they grabbed her, dragging her away into the darkness. I didn't watch. I couldn't. Instead, I looked down at Elijah, pressing a trembling kiss to his forehead. He was safe. That's all that mattered. I turned back to Luther and Vander, exhaustion crashing over me in waves. The battle was over. The nightmare was ending. Time has a way of dulling even the deepest wounds, though the scars remain, reminding me of the battles I fought, the heartbreak I endured, and the choices I made. Years have passed since the night my world shattered and was pieced back together in ways I never expected. The woman who once ran in fear, who fought against fate itself, is gone. In her place stands someone stronger, someone who has seen the worst of life and still finds a reason to keep moving forward. I stand outside our home near the mountains of the Hilton Pack, my eyes fixed on the distant horizon where the Schuyler Pack's borders lie. The wind carries the faintest scent of the pack I once called home, but it no longer feels like mine. My home is here now, with Vander, in the quiet solitude of the forest, where the weight of the past doesn't feel so heavy. But a piece of my heart remains there, where my son belongs. Elijah. The boy I once cradled in my arms, the boy I fought to protect, is now a young man, a warrior standing beside his father, Alpha Luther, preparing to lead their pack. I see him every time I visit. He is strong, fierce, determined. A true Alpha's heir. Still, letting him go had been the hardest thing I had ever done. The sound of footsteps approaches, and before I can turn, strong arms wrap around my waist. Vander. You're thinking about him again, he murmurs against my hair. I sigh, leaning into his warmth. I can't help it. He presses a kiss to my temple. You're his mother. You'll always worry. But he's thriving, Cheryl. You made the right choice. I nod, though my chest still aches with the absence of my son. I know Vander is right. Elijah was never meant to live in the shadows with us. He was meant to stand in the light, to rule, to lead. And he is not alone. Luther had become the father Elijah needed him to be. Time has softened the anger between us, and though we will never go back to what we were, we have learned to coexist with our son. A familiar scent drifts through the air and I turn just in time to see Elijah approaching. His golden eyes, Luther's eyes, shine with determination. He is taller now, stronger, his presence commanding like a true alpha. Mother, he says, slightly breathless, I think I'm ready. My heart clenches. I knew this day would come. I glance at Luther, who stands behind him with his arms crossed, silent approval in his gaze. Then at Vander, who watches with quiet understanding. I lift my hand, brushing damp strands of hair from Elijah's forehead. Then go, my son. My voice wavers, but I don't hold him back. Go, and make your own destiny. Elijah nods, his lips curving into a small, confident smile. And then, just like that, he turns and walks away toward his future, toward whatever fate has in store for him. I exhale, feeling something shift in me. Relief. Pride. A bittersweet kind of freedom. Vander's grip on my waist tightens slightly, his silent way of reminding me that I am not alone. He'll be okay, he murmurs. I squeeze his fingers gently. I know. Luther steps forward, watching Elijah disappear into the training grounds. He's ready, he says simply. I nod. He is. A long silence stretches between us before he speaks again. You chose well. I blink in surprise, looking up at him. Luther meets my gaze, his expression unreadable. Then, for the first time in years, his voice softens. I was too late, he admits, glancing at Vander before looking back at me. But I'm glad he was there for you when I wasn't. The words settle deep inside me, filling the last empty space that once ached for closure. I never thought I would hear those words from him, never thought we would reach a place where the past no longer suffocated us. I give him a small, genuine smile. Thank you, Luther. He nods, stepping back as if silently saying his own goodbye. I watch him for a moment longer before turning back to Vander. Are you okay? He asks. I exhale slowly, letting the wind carry away the last remnants of my doubt. I think, for the first time in a long time, I am. The Schuyler pack will continue to thrive under Luther's rule, and one day, under Elijah's. But Vander and I, we have built a new home, a new life. The past no longer haunts me. The woman who once feared the world, who ran from her pain, is gone. In her place is someone who fought, who survived, who found love when she least expected it. Despite everything, the pain, the betrayals, the loss, I made it. I found my strength. I found my peace. And above all, I found love. Today's story is over. Thank you all for listening.